for this country, and the waters, the coastline, for many, many years. And I would also like to extend my respects to the traditional owners of the lands from which you're dialing in tonight across the continent. And I would like to acknowledge the ways that our ancestors and many people nowadays, regardless of your cultural backgrounds, are putting caring for country and caring for land above everything else, which I think is timely and an important reminder. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Angie. And we can actually begin with your article. And just to say that the concept of this particular issue is part of the Together Spaces series, which is how craft or making can connect us together. It's another kind of post-COVID challenge that we have. And this one in particular is about the way in which the land or country brings us together, caring through making, kind of circular relationship between creativity and the materials that we use to express that creativity and to tell those stories. So, Ange, tell us about the story that you shared, which has quite a personal theme.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kevin. So can everybody see the screen as I talk? I'll speak to the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a real joy to write this article. It's, as Kevin said, quite personal. I did it about my cousin. So my cousin is from the Maranganje Nation. He also has Kuma blood, which is the same as mine, but he's chosen, he feels closer to Maranganje. And we grew up quite close as cousins. And then we kind of drifted apart a bit, as you do, when you grow up. But we met, of all places, in Uluru when we were adults and kind of reconnected there in our mid-20s. And I was so impressed at how much he had stayed close to culture and how much he was still really walking the talk, despite the pressures of commercialization and that we all struggle with as artists. Wayne was just really staying true to his art, staying true to country. He was doing cultural talks, working with different people, and we've since reconnected, and I have actually had him here at my home. Whenever he comes, he brings all his canvases and sets up on the back deck. And my job is usually to make cups of tea and bring him, whenever he needs a break, we'll have a little chat. And he tells me his process is he finds inspiration from the land, but he never plans too far in advance. And he usually sits down 5 minutes before he starts painting and really connects with the earth, as in feeling, what country needs healing, feeling the ancestors talk, and then the design and the images will come to mind, and he creates these beautiful masterpieces. So I think that's all I'll say about my dear cousin Wayne. I'm aware we've got a lot of people to get through. So that's the statue there. He did the design. I don't know if you're from another country, you're probably not aware Aboriginal people are pretty close to either footy, AFL in the south or rugby league in the north. So he did that statue for one of our famous football players, Jonathan Thurston, and designed one of the rings. So that was huge in the communities. He gained a lot of prominence for doing that. And then there's his next artwork.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Angie. And this story really shows the kind of breadth of work that someone like Wayne does. And one of the elements you mentioned is how he used to work as a cattleman on a station. And that's very much part of his experience of being on country as well as these other commissions. And you were very kind to introduce us to Dominic White, who's coming up next, who produced this epic article, Long Dance to Home. Dominic, welcome.
Remember to unmute. I think I've unmuted
Welcome
myself.
to the land of the unmute.
Yeah, welcome to the land of unmuted. Yeah, I'm not sure how to kind of pry into to what I wrote, I guess it's a kind of I've been really taken by the idea of stories not being whole, of learning stories in places that are context driven, so that the idea of sharing with an audience particular places that tell their own story, that hold their story, that are part of a way of sharing. So I guess interwoven in that is different threads. I've tried to wove them together. Here's, if you're having a look at this work that's directly in front of you, I guess we're looking at a transition of slave culture. So I've got a Roman slave collar on as you look at the screen on the left, and it's connected. So it's set up in a particular way. My dog, of course, is barking just as I start speaking. This Roman slave collar is connected to the chains that First Nations folk, Aboriginal folk in Australia got. That was how we were chained and slaved. And those, you know, I'm a blacksmith, I use a forge, I've made these objects. And I guess the central tie in this is the tie dangling from the central work is a bit like a tie, but it's also got the flanges of seaweed. And to the right, we have a collar that's forged like you might armor as a white collar worker. I'll bring in my dog just to make it easier for all. Sorry. So I guess I've been intrigued. I'm an adopted kid, and at about 26, I met my birth mum, and my birth mum's part of the Palawa, which is Tassie mob, and I'm descended from a guy called Malanangena and Dolly Dalrymple, and for those of you who know Tassie will know that sort of area. Connection of story to another. So this shield shape here that's kind of in the center is a bit like a trade offering. It's a bit like a message stick, and it traveled from an exhibition that the previous work's part of and every time this work's touring, and each time it's gone to Devonport. It started at McClellan Sculpture Park, and it's gone up to QUT, up to Queensland, to Meanjin. And each place it goes, I engage with a different artist to respond to this offering, if you like. So Dave Managoff, who is a Tasmanian elder or leader, and I went and found shells that were essentially on my country in some ways. And for me to be able to work with Dave, I've had kind of working my way back in country. The metaphor of the shield is, what do you want to protect? And this is what Dave sort of thought was important, this collection of shells that were on country that's kind of been handed back to the local community, the Six River mob in Tassie. And it's, I guess in the article, I talk about how ownership is quite a really weird stretch. Here's Norton Frederick's response to the same tray when it went up to Meanjin, up to Brisbane at the QUT there. And you can kind of, if we scroll down again, we can see how it's another smaller tray is used with fabric he's dyed. So between us, we kind of came up with these different responses. I guess I used a theme of sound and dance to try and join each section of story together, to give it a rhythm, to give it something other than just words. I make objects, I make things, and I rarely make words in a written form. I quite often teach and artist talks, but I'm not someone who's you know would call myself a wordsmith necessarily. I don't know how much time to take up here, but I guess if you read that story, you'll get an understanding that making is, and here's one of the things that have kind of moved into that space where I'm now moved from one set of stories to another, where I'm making jig dolls, which my grandpa used to make, and perform with. And this idea of dance kind of stitches my article together. I'm not sure whether that covers it, but I think that'll probably do.
It gives us a taste of it, Dominic. But I'd have to say that your writing was quite extraordinary. It was almost like a performance. You really felt invigorated reading it. Never had writing like that before, so it's very pleased how it activates.
Thank you, Kevin. It was a real opportunity. It was a real odd kind of thinking about how do I weave in all these things together? How can I mold this process of learning about myself, learning about my culture, or engaging with ideas and philosophy from both sides of my being, I guess, the kind of Indigenous and non-Indigenous side. How do they weave together in a whole, and how does an artist navigate that out to another body of work? Please have a read.
Contribution. Thank you. Now I'd call on, I see Jack Wilkie-Jans is here. Jack, would you like to join us? You're able to turn on your video.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me? Hi everyone. I'm in the Daintree rainforest.
Wow,
so
really?
So it's been terrible internet all day, although the rain clouds seem to be passing, which is good. Well, actually not that much, but yes, it's a pleasure to join you guys. I am here on Kuku-Yalanji country in between Daintree Village and Wungabadi, which is Wonga Beach, which is probably half an hour north of Port Douglas, which of course is an hour north of Gimoy, Cairns. And so looking at, and thank you, Kevin, for the opportunity to be, part of this particular Garland issue. It was an opportunity to really, at the time when I started out writing the piece, it was to talk about two artists who had a quiet moment, as it were. And then just before the piece was published, we learned that Bernard Lee Singleton was named as a finalist for the Nazi Awards this year. So in that sense, it was a great privilege to write about both Brother Bernard, who is there, pardon me, and of course Uncle Sid Bruce Shortjoe, who is from Pompero on the Western Cape of Cape York Peninsula. And Bernard's family from around the Cairns and Yarrabah area, but also he is Umpala, which is I don't know if anyone knows where I'm talking about, but Cohen in Cape York. So it's almost his Cape York country is almost smack bang middle of the peninsula. And if you go sort of due west of there, you have Pompero. And so these are two men. And when we look at the contemporary Indigenous art movement from North Queensland, it's only been really the last few years that the gentlemen who are part of collectives such as Wikinkugu have started to become known more in their own names and rights, and then showing their works sort of more individually and solo, as it were, than perhaps as a collective. So, however, Bernard and Uncle Sid they had struck that unique place of name recognition quite some time ago, mainly platformed through the Cairns Indigenous Art Fair. And they just do really exciting work. And Uncle Sid, I was able to travel with him back in 2016 through to 2018, up into Europe and to Monaco and to New York and all of those places, taking overseas. I think at that time was the first, and still stands as historic, international touring showcase of ghost nets and other large-scale sculptures of First Nations art from far north Queensland. That includes Dennis Kess, which is the Torres Strait, as well as Cape York. And so Pompero and Arab Island up in the Torres are probably the two most known up in this part of the world for ghost nets. And Uncle Sid does use his hands and he does create these beautiful weaves with ghost nets. But I wanted to talk about his painting more than anything. He is a printmaker as well. But I think I resonate more with paintings. I'm a bit of a traditionalist for myself when it comes to art forms in terms of perhaps what I would look to purchase, and certainly as an artist, what I would look to create. And I felt that his works were or are the true meaning of what a cultural artist is doing, and he almost goes that step further where he'll paint a scene, as you've seen in the photos that are attached to this. He'll paint a scene and it will actually depict different dance rites, different ceremony, and different ritual. Of course, he never tells the audience anything that he's not allowed to say. He keeps a lot secret and sacred. But I felt that his works were somebody I really wanted to talk about. He he's a rising star, but he's not yet a household name, and so having this opportunity, especially to talk about, country and the practices of country in art as well, I got to reflect on, what makes his work so strong, other than them being painted by him, and it was looking further at who he is as a senior lawman and a senior dance and ceremony leader in his community, as well as the chairman of the Pormpuraaw Art Centre board, as well as one of the key proponents and workers at the Men's Shed, which means he is one of the leaders in that community, working with young people to engage young people not only in culture but in just sort of more communal activities that can lead and feed into not only the arts as a craftsperson and a maker of things, but also, in remote areas, any other number of jobs. If you know how to use tools, you know how to get qualified into different industries. And then so looking at Bernard, who was a lot younger than Uncle Sid, but still a very strong man. So I wanted that approach of looking at the menfolk because, we have a very well-known female artist from the Cape, and as it should be. But I was wondering when I was thinking about who I'd write about, how much we've talked about, these great blokes who are doing something totally their own as well, and I thought that was due to celebrate. But I wanted to talk in particular about, I don't know if I want to use the word young and old, but two men from different parts of their lives, and both different daily work, different communities that they come from, and so therefore their lifestyles are different. But really working with directly aligned and with culture in anything else that they may create.
Right.
And Bernard down in Cairns is just an amazing craftsperson, as you see, a brilliant painter who goes into fantasy and he goes into the supernatural and he goes into the stories and the lore and what actually are, to our people, realities. And there's something powerful about just the two of them together, I thought. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks very much, Jack. And like with Angie's article about Wayne and all the various activities he engages in, it shows how there's more to an artist than what you do in the studio. And it's also how you engage with country, and things like the men's sheds and so on are all part of it. And now we move to the Netherlands, to Salome Katamatse, who is our first Georgian contributor. I don't know how to say hello in Georgian, but greetings. It's great to have you with us, and we'll get your story up. If you'd like to start introducing it.
Yeah, of course. So, hello everyone. I'm a Georgian-born landscape architect who currently is based in Italy and in Netherlands. And the experience that I wrote about the article was taking place in France. So I've been moving a lot lately. But yeah, it's really deeply personal, the article, and it is very connected, actually somehow mixes together up of what I do in my professional life as a practitioner and as an architect, but as well in my research. And it resonated a lot with the main topic as well of the magazine, of the issue, the land. So I was in the artistic residency for 1 month in France, in Domaine des Bouchers, where I decided somehow to work a lot with the land and with the landscape, but throughout the sky. So to observe and to try to map and represent maybe the traces that are so intertwined and interconnected with the land, but they are not physically visible and so obvious in that moment in the present. So I worked a lot with the different mediums, mapping, taking photos, sketching as well, because when I arrived there, I actually didn't know anything much about birds. So I started as well to understand somehow how the interrelations as well with the land and how they are coordinated. And I was really fascinated by the trajectories, because geographically where I was, it was exactly the flying point from north to south of the migration of the flows. So I was extremely curious by the fact how these trajectories, they are never random, but they are so related with the seasonality, with the changes, with the land transformation as well. So yeah, in the end, I worked as well with as well in a very architectural way as an artifact. The photo that you see is an object which is called Daedalus. I fabricated it, I designed, and then I welded, and it was also for me a first experience. So I worked a lot outside. So this should be, let's say, as an artifact, a project of a staircase that moves throughout the land and throughout the landscape to observe the sky. So it's not like a, let's say, normal stair, but you somehow, as a performer and as a person who wants to observe the upper part of the landscape, you need to work a lot with the land. So how this object actually transforms, mutates, and how you work with it together with on the ground and through the ground. So yeah, for me, it was also, let's say, amazing experience somehow to work with the mapping processes and understanding it, because I'm really used to it, to do it from, let's say, the campus, universities, etc. Since doing my research also in Georgia, in the mountains of Georgia, again, about the mapping the border landscapes. But yeah, for me, also the writing about it was an amazing occasion to speak maybe a little bit, not such a scientific part of the land and of the landscape, but also artistic interpretation of it and working, let's say, much outside.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that, Salome.
Thank you
And
very much.
it's a remarkable residency, being based in the land in a working farm, and that when the season demands that artists are out on the land harvesting and so on. And it shows from your work how that creates a culture that connects people to the natural environment very strongly. So thank you. And now I
Thank you.
see that we've got Jane and Jules have joined us. So we might go back to, if I can just find them. Yes, here you are. If we can go back to your article, which opens the issue. If you'd like to tell us about that, that would be terrific, because it was a very strong, obviously, Jules, you've been a key contributor to Garland over the recent years, and your articles are much appreciated. And now you're passing the baton on to your daughter, Jane. So if you'd like to tell us about this article and project, that would be terrific.
Thanks, Kevin. Mum's here with me. She's got a slight speech impairment, so she'll probably chime in, but I'll start talking. So we wrote this article together. We should just acknowledge that we are Barramudigal Darug people, which means traditionally our Aboriginal ancestors are from the Western Sydney part of Australia, and we're on Wiradjuri country here tonight in Wagga Wagga in New South Wales. So we wrote this article just to talk about what we're doing within our family and within our broader community in terms of bringing people back onto country and exercising our cultural responsibilities. It's difficult for us. I guess we look at our situation as living in a direct diaspora, where culturally we connect with other people whose original family lines go back to the Sydney area. But because of the history of Sydney, we are now in many places. And so one thing we've been working on is bringing our stories back to country, because that's very important for the truth telling of that place. And then in doing that, working with institutions that are on our lands there in Sydney, to provide a form of reparation, I guess, in bringing us back together to do our healing on country. So these pictures here are just, there's an exhibition that I've done that's on at Blacktown Arts in Sydney at the moment. And these are some of the weavings that are in the exhibition. So I should say Mum and I are weavers. We practice the Ngarrindjeri style of weaving, which was taught to us here in the Wiradjuri community. For me, about just over 10 years ago, and probably 15 years ago for Mum. And so weaving has been a cultural practice that has helped us to tell our stories and have visibility back in Sydney, so that we can bring attention to, I guess, our family line and the stories connected with our family line. And that's what the exhibition really has been about. So was there anything particular you wanted me to speak more on, Kevin? I could talk all night.
It's just terrific that you could join us and I guess talk about land, be upfront about the fact that there's so much disconnection to country amongst the people that you're working with, and you're in a very strong way working with institutions, having hard conversations with them, and but being steadfast in that in order to help those communities come together, direct nation as you have. I think it's a wonderful model. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay. And now we go to Lauren Downton, who can share with us the work that she's told us about, Between the Quarry and Paradise, Grafting Rubbish onto Nature. If you'd like to start, and I'll get your article up.
Sure, thanks, Kevin. Hi, everyone. So I am a ceramic artist. I live and work on Kaurna land in South Australia. I mostly work with porcelain, and I use grafting as a concept to sort of allows me to take diverse things, propagate them, and sort of put them together. And this article that I've written for Garland is really, I guess, detailing my latest body of work, in which I actually started working with rubbish and detritus, which is something that's completely new for me. And it sort of came about when I stumbled on a disused quarry site that's near my house in the Adelaide foothills. And I started making molds of the rubbish and these strange cast off things that I was finding in this quarry site, just things that were being illegally dumped there, and slip casting them with porcelain. Yeah, and just playing with those ideas, grafting animal and botanical and human made forms together, and just thinking about how the natural and the artificial are becoming so enmeshed in our society today. So that's some of the scenes from the quarry site there. It's not meant to be a dumping site, but sadly that's what it has become, and it's oddly surrounded by nature in the Adelaide foothills, but a very industrial place. And I think it just really encapsulates the nature of industry and nature becoming so meshed together. So the article sort of documents my upbringing in rural South Africa and how I grew up with very dramatic landscapes and wildlife. And I think that love for nature is something I've carried in my practice. It's sort of where all of this work started. And it was never really quite my intention to start working with rubbish and thrown away and cast off things, but it's become something that really interests me. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lauren. And your work certainly shows how you can use the plasticity of clay to create these hybrid forms that help us think about the messiness between nature and the human machine in your work. So thank you.
Thanks,
And now we
Kevin.
go over to the other end of the world, excuse me, to Rhode Island, to Maxwell Fertig, talking about Japanese knotwood, which I think is a similar kind of theme in terms of something that's seen as artificial intrusion, in this case, an invasive species. So would you like to start talking about your article? And I should say, we should appreciate that it's around 4 a.m. for Maxwell, so kudos for you being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you for having me in this edition of Garland. All these pieces are so fantastic, and but yeah, I'll just talk a little bit about my work. My name is Max Furtick. I'm from Providence, Rhode Island, which is on traditional Narragansett people's land. I'm originally from East Greenwich, Rhode Island, which is 20 minutes south of here. It's a very small state, but this piece was a project of mine from the past 2 years that I'm still working on in some form, but I was fascinated with the post-industrial nature of Providence, Rhode Island. If you're not familiar, which many are not, because it is such a small state, Providence had 5 of the largest factories in the world in the beginning of at the beginning of the 1900s. It was sort of the first industrial mill in America, was Slater Mill. But 5 of these factories were where so much of the industry in the United States was, and to this day, at around the 1950s, a lot of these closed down for various reasons, and but largely the trace of these places are in the sort of post-industrial sites that are here. And a lot of these are now covered with invasive plants, which we have various different feelings about and various different kind of biases. So my idea with this project was to continue to identify the ways that we think about invasive plants, but to also connect industry to ecology in different ways and understand the many ways that they are entangled, and also begin to think about invasive plants in a different way and start to reframe the ways that these plants have been displaced as a part of colonial development, and how contaminated soil has allowed for them to thrive and spread in an unnatural way. And another way in this project, I hope to work with nature instead of work against it. And in many ways, I wanted to try to break down this plant, Japanese knotweed, which possibly many of you are familiar with. It was introduced into the colonial United States in the 1800s, but as an ornamental. But today it's pretty much everywhere. It's all over any train tracks or next to the highway, or any kind of post-industrial site. So as a part of this project, I built a raft, as you're seeing right here, coated the ends with beeswax, basically to create a symbolic device around flotation, and around safety, and around salvation. As you saw before, I also created a series of silverware out of this plant, casting it and then coating it with a thin layer of actual silver. One of the main industries of Providence was the fine silver industry. So this piece was mainly to create a feedback loop between the invasive ecologies, as well as the very contaminating in craft industries of this area. So that's basically where I I went with this piece. And this was a great opportunity for me to take my abstract and kind of deconstruct it in different ways, and look at what I've already written, and kind of create this dialogue between the objects and what I'm thinking about now, 2 years from the beginning of it. So thank you guys.
Right. Thanks so much, Maxwell. It's really an epic project of yours, and it resonates so well with Lauren's we heard just before in terms of working in that zone. And do keep us up to date with your alchemic transformation of this invasive species into a kind of friend. So, Mel, you're still with us. That's terrific. So you might like to start to talk about your piece, which is really a kind of a critical link piece because it connects back to so many other stories we've already published in Garland related to jewelry and the land.
That's right. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for the invitation to write for this issue. Making jewelry as an encounter with the land has become an increasingly large part of my practice. I live and make on the lands of the Wadi Wadi people, Dharawal country in southern New South Wales. And excuse me one sec. Miles. Sorry, we're just it's a busy family home this evening. So this article was a really lovely way to reflect on walking in place and on the same stretch of land, which I do each day with my dog. I like to observe, notice, and come to know the place through the walking practice, and also do my part of cleaning that place by collecting plastics and other debris that is, as others who've spoken today do, so the matter out of place. Other works like the one on the screen at the moment are more of a reflection back to observations of the landscape. This one, a textile piece looking back at the sand dunes in the area. So yeah, really just thinking about land and jewelry on the land, and this article introduces the jewelry trellis of Garland and a series of articles that are written mostly by jewellers who make with and on the land. So people like Cara Johnson, Alice Wish, Roseanne Bartley, Zoe Vaness, and others. Kevin's just showing you here. So yes, that's it from me. Thank you so much. It was a really lovely piece to be asked to write. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mel, and thanks for taking your time out from
sorry for the
family
background.
And this key moment, which will be a legacy, really, hopefully will keep the trellis growing in the Garden of Stories. That would be wonderful. Thank you so much. Now go to India, and I hope I say your name correctly. If it's Rachna, is that right?
Rachna.
Rachna, greetings. I'll just get your article up. And if you'd like to, Rachna's from the MAP Academy, which have been a terrific partner for Garland magazine, sharing rich kind of stories from their collection and the work they do in weaving together threads that link the objects in their collection. So would you like to say something about your article?
Sure. So this is my first contribution to Garland, so thank you for the opportunity. And thank you to everyone else on the call who has so generously shared their art and their research. For this issue, I contributed an essay on Hortus malabaricus, or the Garden of Malabar, which is a multi-volume work on the botanical wealth of the Malabar region in southern India. The work was compiled and published in the second half of the 17th century, and it was created by administrators and artists of the Dutch East India Company and Indian physicians and helpers. And together, this group of people documented nearly 740 plants, citing their medicinal uses and how they were used in the day-to-day lives of the people of the region. Given that land was the driving theme of this issue, this topic resonated because it reflected how the idea of land was both a political and commercial concern for European trading companies in Asia in this period. But more importantly, the hortus reflected the systems of indigenous knowledge, uh, particularly indigenous scientific knowledge, which were historically collected and handed down among communities in India as legacies. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rachna, for that. And to see that there are continuing, it provides a source of continuing work, this particular piece, particular publication. Thank you so much. And sorry, I don't think we saw those images there. Apologies for that. Now, if we'd like to go to Shoso Shimbo-san to join us. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you for having.
Wonderful. Greetings.
Greeting. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all online. My name is Shoso Shimba. I'm a Ikebana artist. In my article, I try to explain attitude to nature in Ikebana. When we create Ikebana work, it's not we're not trying to manipulate nature. We are not just trying to copy the nature. What we are trying to do is to meditate on nature and find its kind of ideal states and try to express it. For instance, this image, this is a French garden. They manipulate nature according to human design. It's a very easy way, but this is not the Ikebana way. And also we look at the English garden here. This is a kind of, probably people are trying to copy how nature looks and try to represent what they see. On the other hand, this is a typical or very famous Japanese garden here. This is not a copy of nature. Looks like the island on the sea, but this is not trying to describe island in the sea. And this is not trying to manipulate nature according to human design. And this is something we meditate on nature. And in the meditation, try to find some idealized nature. And that's how we approach nature. And that kind of attitude is obvious in Ikebana as well. I have been trying to express this idea many times, actually, try to explain again, but I have never been able to express clearly. So I wrote this article again, but when I read it, I don't think I'm successful again. Maybe in the future I will have to write the article about the same topic again. But I hope you will enjoy my show.
No, it's I think what you've done, Shoso, is that you've introduced it into a different kind of conversation.
Okay.
Because we've had I think some references to Ikebana in previous issues on Japanese craft, for instance.
Yeah.
But here, when you think about a relation to nature, it introduces a unique Japanese perspective, which I think is interesting to combine with the others. It shows a certain confidence that it's possible to connect with nature through mindfulness and through a certain aesthetic appreciation, which is interesting. And obviously there are various devices like haiku and bonsai and so on that also provide vehicles that people can use in other parts of the world to do that. So thank you so much, Shosu. And now I'd like to go across the Tasman Sea to Sonia Fremel, I think is here. She was here. Sonia, are you still there? No. So we can go to Lokesh now, back to India for a wonderful story about shoemakers. Thanks very much, Lokesh.
Thank you. So, my article talks about a living heritage, which is quite seen but unseen in India. That is the shoemakers. And it's based in my recently adopted hometown, that is Dehradun. And these shoemakers are small scale independent studio shops. So usually there are 2 or 1 people working together, and they they are kind of ignored. People have a craze for branded shoes, which are like 4 times higher than these bespoke shoes what they make. And the shoes I got 1 pair made for myself, and I was quite amazed by the quality of the craftsmanship. And also the shoemakers feel very underconfident in today's time, because most of them are not literate. They don't know how to read or write. And that's where also one questions that is knowledge only about able to read and write. They understand even foot pathology in a different manner, unable to articulate, but still able to make shoes for people with flat foot, with different kind of special needs. What's also very interesting that some people in India may not even consider them as heritage craft people, because what they make is from the so their history goes back to the time when pre-independence, when India was a British colony. So the shoes they make are Derby, Broke, Oxford, and they are very prolific in drawing these shoes, sketches also. And so they adopted the British heritage as their own. They don't make the traditional Indian juti. So that's where also they're kind of somewhere in between. But the fact is, in India, most of the time we wear juti only for a ritual. Most of the time we wear Western style, or now moving to sneakers. So I hope this article draws attention to the shoemakers, because there is a huge caste stigma also attached. And in Dehradun, it surprised me. I could map almost 40 independent shoemakers. None of their next generation is entering the trade, and there are almost 400 families. And it's a research I'm working on. And uh, 17 July, I'm having an exhibition, a photo exhibition on the same topic in Dehradun. So I hope I can reconnect the old clientage of Dehradun and bring back appreciation for the craft people. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lokesh, the song catcher for craft, one of our great perennials, who provides articles with great compassion of the craftspeople, particularly where he lives. So thank you so much, Lokesh. And I think that's about all in terms of the speakers, unless there's there's a lot of people here, so I'm hoping that I haven't missed anyone. Okay. Just in terms of the formal procedures, it would be very nice if we could come together for a ritual Zoom screenshot to express our appreciation of the many writers who've both appeared and contributed to it. So if you'd like to turn on your camera for that and put on a very nice Zoom face, I'll count it down so you'll know when to open your eyes. So that would be good. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, does anyone have anything to say or to offer that they'd like to contribute to what's been said and what's been shared?
Can I just quickly say, Kevin, thank you very much for bringing it all together. It's Angie here. I'm not sure if my screen's showing.
Yes.
Thank you so much for all that you do, Kevin, and for bringing us together and helping us to share our stories more broadly than what we would otherwise. So, yeah, deepest gratitude to you.
Well, it's only really a matter of providing a space free of advertising that's independent without any institutional agendas so that authentic stories like the ones you've shared can have a place to thrive. But, you know, it's really so inspiring to see the intrinsic values associated with these stories, that they're not really ticking boxes or trying to fit with the particular corporate agenda or a state agenda. They're really coming from the heart, and that's really appreciated, and it's very important in this series.
Kevin, you're visionary
Sorry.
in terms of setting up Garland magazine. We all acknowledge that. And we all love to read stories about the things we make and people's engagement with the making process, and interesting stories from the land and countries where we live. So thank you, Kevin. We all acknowledge that.
Thanks very much, Liz. But I think Saiful would have an interesting comment to make always.
I don't know whether it's interesting, Kevin, but I'm really moved by the presentations that were done over here. There's so much strength and sensitivity within them, within the art and within the delivery itself. One of the issues, or rather one of the thoughts that crossed my mind, is that Australia seems to be very special. I mean, obviously we've had more presentations from that part of the world in terms of its engagement with the Aborigine, if I'm wrong in saying that, or with the First Citizens. In the way that the artists take so much pride in reflecting sometimes on their connections with them, even if they are part Aborigine or they're not, how much respect that is paid to that, and the continuously highlighting their ways of life. I mean, it's very different from other countries where First Citizens, let's say the USA, or even in many parts of Latin America. I mean, I've been to many, many countries where this connection, this relationship is not treated with the same respect or not raised in that manner. What I would like to just understand very quickly, perhaps, is that through the work that you have done, or perhaps similar work that people have done in the field of arts, has it been a question of raising awareness about their contribution to Australia? Or is it more a reflection? In other words, does it actually move the public towards recognizing them and their rights more? Or is it simply about, sort of presenting what they have? Does art play a more, let's say, directional role over here? Or does art simply depict what is happening?
Yes, that's a very difficult question to answer, Saiful. In Australia, we unfortunately suffered quite a blow to reconciliation and relation between First Nations and settler and migrants when a referendum to adopt a voice for First Nations people was rejected quite soundly by about 60% of the Australian population. And I think it was a very generous offer to take us on the journey, and so many of us feel quite wounded by that and determined to try and do what we can, even if we're not the 60%, to ensure that that sort of dialogue can continue with respect. And I think that's the case with so many countries that certainly in Garland we deal with, that have got reputations increasingly for being quite popularist and nationalistic, even chauvinist. And I think it seems, and we've had a discussion, I think, about this before, Saiful, that it's still good to engage with those countries because it's important to work with the people who may be in opposition or wanting to express a different point of view, to encourage them and to make them feel that they're not alone in terms of being able to present their particular perspective. So I think that's perhaps it's like an island, Garland, in that sense. It's sort of separate from those sort of geopolitical heightened kind of tensions that occurs, and hopefully it keeps open that particular space like a garden does, in terms of allowing the diversity to flourish and realizing how those connections can cross-pollinate and can strengthen each other. But somebody else might like to respond to Saiful. Tyson.
Yeah. Hey, brother, just always like I don't know, you allow us all to weave, our threads all in together, and it always makes a bigger story that no one intended, but is, big message coming through, and you can see it tonight. And it's that, all our kin, human and non-human, they only behave badly if they land in a place that's been treated badly, and disturbed earth, or, sick country that's sick already. Otherwise, they tend to not behave badly. So, it takes a special effort from a species to wreck things. They have to be pretty damaged, already from somewhere else they've been. But most species will just naturalize, and I can see everybody. The plants are already making embassy around the world with everybody, and reaching out and weaving us all together with this same kind of big message of, diaspora, not necessarily a bad thing, and there's good story to come from that.
Well, maybe Tyson, you'd like to give Saiful a kind of a glimpse of the work that you're doing in your new book, linking, which does link to the cultures of the Naga in South Asia, in terms of different kind of embassy, or are you strictly embargoed not to say anything about it?
No. Well, it's only been enabled by you anyway. All the yarns we've had. For that, you like hands off curating the whole sort of thing. I should show you what I've been doing with white poplar, but that's coming in, hijacking the whole narrative. But I can show you this. I don't know. The mistakes are interesting. The wood doesn't do what you intended it to do.
Yeah.
I was trying to make a boomerang for all that snake stories we've been doing together, and it just refused to just be a boomerang. The wood, when I cut into it, this tea tree, it just was a snake. And so now it's a snake, and I'm not quite sure what to do with it, but I'm still kind of sitting with it. Big Kabul thing there, gubby, how we sung in. Same country I was sitting on 2 days ago. Talking up with Mob there about that. Things are moving in the world in fairly beautiful ways. I'm working a lot with weeds, and it's helping me to metabolize all the voice and the referendum stuff and all that. It's and how we're going to bring people into good relation, and how do you bring things in? How do you make things welcome in country in ways that they grow right and form symbioses, and symbiotic systems? It takes a bit of time sometimes.
Yes, well, they do talk about the Reconquista in Latin America, and I think, Saiful, you're getting a sense of the way in which after settlement, the strength of indigenous cultures is slowly re-emerging in terms of its impact in the way we think. And certainly Tyson's book Sand Talk helped generate the idea of the thinker-maker, someone who comes up with ideas through objects that are carved or woven, and that's become quite an important model for practice, which straddles the studio, the workshop, and the university, where a lot of people have come from, to think that there's a space which isn't just about publishing in peer-reviewed journals, but of telling stories and keeping those stories alive. And I think that's a set of values that's become quite important for so many other, even non-Indigenous Australians. but it's also shared obviously in many of the First Nations peoples in parts of the land. Lokesh has done terrific work with the Adivasi in India. So it's, you know, it's a very common theme.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. We've gone a little bit over time, but thank you so much. And the next issue will be in September, associated with the Indian Ocean Craft Triennial. It's called The Table. It's the space we sit around. And it's about another aspect, perhaps, of Australian culture, which is the more bureaucratic one of making organizations, of the sort of politics of small communities, of membership in an age of social media, how we keep people committed to support each other through those organizations. And it relates to the 60th anniversary of the World Crafts Council, which is occurring at the end of the year, which is another organization that's seeded so many other little crafts councils all around the world. And it's an opportunity to reflect on what that journey has been and where it's going in the future. But thank you so much, everyone. Take care, and let's be good ancestors.